Hello, my name is Sergeant Daniel Brooks. I'm from Austin, Texas, 32 years old, and I've served over a decade in the United States Army. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to sit here and share something like this. But after what happened to me overseas, after the night my life changed forever, I feel like I owe it to someone out there, maybe to you, to tell the truth of what I experienced. Because it wasn't just pain, it wasn't just fear, it was something beyond. Let me take you back to the dusty mountains of Afghanistan, 2012. My unit was on patrol, late afternoon, the kind of day when the air itself felt heavy. We were tired, tense, always watching the horizon. That's when it happened. An ambush, sudden and merciless. The world erupted in gunfire and explosions, and within seconds, the only thing I could hear was the pounding of my own heart and the screams of my brothers in arms. You don't think, you just react. That's how survival works. I remember the dirt flying around me, chunks of rock slamming into my body armor, the stench of burning fuel mixed with dust and iron. It's impossible to forget. And then came the moment that changed everything. A mortar landed close, too close. I felt the shockwave hit me before I even understood what had happened. My legs buckled, my chest caved in, and for a split second I thought, this is it. I was no longer sure if I was alive or dead. When I hit the ground, there was silence inside me, even though chaos roared all around. I couldn't move. My ears were ringing, my vision blurred. I felt blood trickling down my face and pooling under me. My weapon slipped from my hands. And as strange as it sounds, there was this eerie calm settling over me, like my body knew before my mind that I was slipping away. I whispered something, maybe a prayer, maybe just a broken thought. God, don't let me go. Then it happened. Time slowed. The battlefield faded into the background, almost like I was falling out of the noise. I could still see my brothers fighting, bullets cutting through the air, but it was as though I was being pulled back, lifted from the ground. My body was broken and heavy, but something inside me, my awareness, my soul, call it what you want, was suddenly weightless. I was rising. And for the first time in years, I felt no fear, just release. I found myself above the firefight, watching it from a distance that felt both close and infinite. The dust and smoke curled below like storm clouds. I saw myself lying there, motionless, my helmet cracked, blood staining the dirt. And I thought, so this is how it ends. This is how a soldier dies. But instead of horror, I felt compassion. Compassion for the body I had called home. Compassion for the boy who had enlisted at 18, eager and naive. Compassion for the man who had carried so much pain, anger, and pride. That was me down there, but also not me anymore. Then, a presence. I can't explain it in military terms. It wasn't a soldier. It wasn't a comrade. It was light. A soft, radiant light that seemed to call me forward. It didn't blind me, it warmed me the way sunlight does after freezing cold. And in that moment, all the noise, all the terror, all the years of guilt and regret I carried, they melted away. My mother's face flashed before me. My father's stern eyes, the laughter of my sister when we were kids. I could feel them, not just remember them. As I drifted further, I noticed something impossible. Figures standing in the glow. At first they looked like silhouettes, but as I drew nearer I recognized them. Soldiers I had lost. Men from my unit. Brothers who never made it home. They weren't in pain anymore. They weren't broken. They stood tall, their eyes shining, welcoming me. One of them, Corporal Reyes, who'd been killed in an IED blast a year earlier, stepped forward. He didn't speak, but I heard him all the same. Not yet, brother. Your fight isn't finished. I wanted to stay. God knows I wanted to stay. In that place there was no fear, no weight of war, no scars, just belonging, just peace. But then came the pull, gentle but firm, like unseen hands guiding me back. I resisted, begging inside, please don't send me back there. But the answer wasn't cruel. It was patient, unyielding. You still have work to do. They need you. The next thing I knew, I was choking on air, coughing, spitting blood. My body screamed with pain. My brothers had pulled me behind cover, pressing their hands against my wounds, yelling my name. The world crashed back with unbearable force. Gunfire, screams, the metallic taste of blood. I was alive. Barely, but alive. And though the pain was excruciating, part of me carried a piece of that light back with me. A piece I would never forget. That was the night I died, or at least the night I crossed over and came back. A soldier's near-death experience on a battlefield most people will never see. And it left me with questions I'm still asking to this day. What did I see? Who, or what, pulled me back? And why was I spared when so many others weren't? I don't have all the answers, but I know this. Death is not the end. And for a soldier, that changes everything. When they finally got me out of that kill zone, I was half-conscious, drifting in and out. My brothers carried me like I was already gone. The medics rushed me to a field hospital, their hands firm, but their voices trembling. I could hear words like internal bleeding or fractures or shock, but underneath it all there was a strange calm. I had just stared death in the face, and instead of terror there was clarity. A clarity that terrified me more than the pain itself. As they strapped me to a stretcher, I looked up at the desert sky. The stars were so sharp, so endless. It felt like they were waiting to swallow me whole. I remember thinking, is this what heaven looks like from down here? My body was wrecked, but my soul, it felt expanded, as if it couldn't be contained by skin and bone anymore. Every sound, every touch, every flicker of light burned into me with impossible intensity. The morphine never really worked. Maybe it was my stubbornness, maybe it was something bigger. But I stayed awake through most of it. And in that wakefulness, I felt things others couldn't see. I'd hear the steady hum of machines, and beneath it, a vibration, a resonance that reminded me of the light I'd just left behind. Nurses leaned over me, their faces lined with worry. But sometimes, for a heartbeat, I'd see them glow just faintly. It was as though the veil between this world and the next hadn't quite closed yet. The nights in that field hospital stretched on forever. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd fall back into that tunnel, that strange current pulling me toward something vast and infinite. Sometimes I welcomed it, whispering to myself, "Take me back." Other times I fought it, clinging to the rough sheets, to the sound of boots in the corridor, to the smell of antiseptic that grounded me in this life. Life and death felt like two doors half open, and I was stuck in between. One night I had a vision, or maybe it was more than that. I saw my unit, still out there, still fighting. I saw them not as flesh and blood, but as flames, each one burning with its own light. Some burned steady and strong. Others flickered, fragile, about to be extinguished. And in the center of it all, there was a shadow creeping closer, threatening to snuff them out. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, convinced I had just seen the battlefield through another set of eyes. I started to wonder if that was why I'd been sent back. Not for myself, but for them. The words I'd heard in the light echoed in my chest. "Not yet, brother. They need you." It haunted me. Because even as my body was failing, I knew I couldn't escape the responsibility. Survival wasn't just about me anymore. It was about carrying something bigger, something sacred, something I didn't fully understand. That thought kept me breathing when the pain begged me to stop. Recovery was brutal. The surgeons pieced me back together with metal plates and screws. They told me I'd never run the same, never carry the same weight. But they underestimated the heart of a soldier. I pushed through therapy, every step a battle. What they didn't know was that I wasn't just fighting for my body, I was fighting for my soul. Because deep down, I feared that if I gave up, if I let the pain win, I'd lose that piece of light forever. And yet, there was guilt. Crushing guilt. Why was I still here when Reyes wasn't? Why did I see his face in that glow, telling me to go back while he stayed behind? I carried that survivor's guilt like a rucksack full of bricks. Every time I looked at my reflection, I asked the same question: why me? And every time there was no answer. Just silence. The kind of silence that forces you to dig deeper, to confront the ghosts you'd rather avoid. Months later, when I finally made it stateside, people called me a hero. They shook my hand, thanked me for my service, told me I was lucky to be alive. But I didn't feel lucky. I felt chosen, and not in a way that filled me with pride. Chosen for what exactly? To limp through life with scars and hardware in my bones? Or chosen to carry a message I didn't know how to put into words? That was the weight that never left me. So I began to write. Late at night, in the quiet of my room, I'd scribble down fragments of memory, flashes of light, the words of Reyes and the others. I didn't know if I was writing for myself or for the men I lost. Maybe both. But each page was a reminder. I had crossed over, and I had come back. And that meant something even if I didn't yet know what. My story wasn't finished, and neither, apparently, was my mission. Back home, people thought the hardest part was learning to walk again, but it wasn't. The hardest part was sitting in silence, realizing the man who left for war wasn't the same man who came back. I had seen too much, felt too much. Death wasn't an enemy anymore. It was a companion, a shadow at my side, reminding me that life was fragile, precious and temporary. That knowledge weighed more than any body armor I had ever worn. I started noticing things most people overlooked. The way sunlight poured through the blinds in the morning, the sound of children laughing at a park, even the smell of rain on hot pavement. Small details that once meant nothing suddenly felt sacred. And every time I caught myself drifting into anger or bitterness, I'd remember that light, that peace. And I'd ask myself, is this really what you want to carry? Or do you want to carry something better? At first, I tried to bury the experience. Soldiers aren't supposed to talk about visions, about tunnels of light, about hearing voices of the fallen. We're supposed to be tough, grounded, rational. But the more I kept it inside, the more it ate away at me. Nightmares turned into night sweats, and night sweats turned into long hours staring at the ceiling, begging God for an explanation. Eventually, I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I had to tell someone. The first person I told was a fellow vet, a Marine I met at a support group. I expected him to laugh, to call me crazy, but instead he leaned forward, eyes wide, and whispered, "Man, I had something like that too." His story wasn't the same, but it carried the same essence, this sense of leaving the body, of being held by something greater, of being told it wasn't his time. That night I realized I wasn't alone. I wasn't losing my mind. Something real had happened. From that moment, I began to see my brothers in arms differently. Each one of us carried invisible scars, ghosts that no one else could see. Some drank to silence them. Some fought in silence until the silence consumed them. And some, like me, tried to turn those ghosts into lessons. I started listening more, judging less. Because who was I to say what was real or not? I had walked in both worlds. I had seen the battlefield from above. I had touched eternity. The war had hardened me, but the near death softened me. Strange balance, isn't it? Out there, I had learned to kill, to protect, to fight without hesitation. But beyond that threshold, I had learned to forgive, to surrender, to simply be. And somehow I had to hold both truths in the same hands. It was like trying to carry fire and water without letting either one extinguish the other. Some days I managed. Other days I failed miserably. I began reading again, something I hadn't done since basic training. Books on faith, philosophy, even poetry. I wasn't searching for religion, not exactly. I was searching for echoes of what I had seen. And sure enough, in ancient words, in prayers whispered across centuries, I found glimpses of the light I had touched. Different names, different symbols, but the same truth. There's more to this life than flesh and steel. There's something that endures, something waiting beyond. One evening, I visited the families of fallen comrades. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. What could I possibly say to a mother who buried her son? But as I sat with them, something stirred in me. I told them what I had seen. I told them about Reyes, about the others in the light standing strong, whole, free of pain. At first they stared at me in silence. Then one of the mothers began to cry, not out of grief, but relief. And in her tears, I realized maybe that was my mission, to bring peace where there was only despair. Word spread slowly. Other vets started reaching out, asking if I'd share my story. Some wanted comfort. Others wanted proof they weren't insane. I didn't have all the answers, but I shared what I could. That there's no such thing as dying alone, that the ones we lose aren't truly lost, and that sometimes the hardest battles are fought not with rifles, but with faith. The more I spoke, the lighter my guilt became, as if speaking was part of the work I had been sent back to do. Still, the questions lingered. Why me? Why this? Why was I chosen to come back when so many others weren't? Maybe I'll never know. Maybe that's the point. But here's what I do know. Life is not just survival. It's not just about getting through the day or carrying scars like badges of honor. Life is about remembering the light even in the darkest nights. And if my story helps even one soldier, one veteran, one broken soul find that light, then maybe, just maybe, that's why I was spared. In the months that followed, life felt like a battlefield of its own. Not one fought with bullets or mortars, but with memories, doubts, and shadows that crept in when the house went quiet. Yet alongside the darkness, I started noticing signs, little things that made me pause. A sudden flicker of light in a room, a voice in the wind calling my name, the unshakable feeling that I wasn't walking alone. I began to wonder, had the light really let go of me, or was it still here guiding me? One night I was sitting on my porch, staring at the stars the way I had in Afghanistan. My body ached from the cold, but something stirred deep inside me. The silence broke with a whisper, not from my mind, but from somewhere beyond. Remember the work? Those words hit me like a bullet. I didn't know what the work was, but I knew it had nothing to do with medals or promotions. It was about people, about souls, about carrying a truth bigger than myself. At first I thought I was losing it. Maybe it was PTSD, maybe just my brain misfiring. But then, strange coincidences piled up. I'd dream of a fallen brother, and the next day his mother would call, needing to talk. I'd think of Reyes, and suddenly I'd smell the sand and diesel of that Afghan road. These weren't hallucinations. They were connections, threads pulling me back to the tapestry I had glimpsed on the other side. Threads reminding me that the dead weren't gone, only changed. I began volunteering at the VA hospital. At first I just sat with other veterans, drinking bad coffee, swapping stories. But soon the conversations turned deeper. Men with haunted eyes would lean in and whisper their secrets. Visions in combat, dreams of the fallen, voices they couldn't explain. Most were terrified to admit it out loud. But when I shared my story, their shoulders relaxed. Suddenly they weren't alone. And I realized maybe this was the work. To stand in the gap between silence and truth. Some days, though, the weight felt unbearable. I'd drive past a cemetery and feel waves of sorrow roll over me like gunfire. I'd see a folded flag on someone's mantle and nearly collapse under the grief it carried. It wasn't just empathy. It was as if I was carrying fragments of every soldier's pain I had ever known. There were nights I prayed, God, why did you send me back if it hurts this much? And in those moments, I swear I'd feel that same light wrap around me, whispering, because you can carry it. I started keeping a journal of these experiences, pages filled with scribbles about dreams, about whispers in the night, about sudden waves of peace that came in the middle of my storms. Sometimes I doubted myself. Other times the clarity was so sharp it left me trembling. Reading back through those pages, a pattern emerged. I wasn't just remembering what happened in Afghanistan. I was being reminded over and over that the light wasn't behind me. It was ahead of me, calling me forward. One of the most powerful moments happened at a memorial service. I was asked to speak about the men we had lost. And as I stood there looking at the rows of grieving families, my knees almost gave out. But then, just as I felt the weight would crush me, I saw it, faint but undeniable, a glow behind them, like every fallen brother was standing guard. I spoke through tears, telling them what I saw, telling them their sons and husbands were not gone. And for the first time, I felt the chains of survivor's guilt begin to crack. Of course, not everyone believed me. Some said it was trauma. Some said it was my mind trying to cope. And maybe they're right. But let me tell you this. When you've felt the warmth of eternity, no skeptic's words can erase it. When you've looked into the eyes of the dead and seen them whole, no diagnosis can make you doubt it. I didn't need anyone else's approval anymore. I had walked through fire and light, and I knew the truth in my bones. Slowly, my purpose became clearer. It wasn't about telling war stories. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about hope. Hope for the soldier who wakes up screaming at 3 a.m. Hope for the widow who wonders if her husband still exists somewhere. Hope for the young recruit who believes death is the end. My work, I realized, was to carry the light back into the places most consumed by darkness, and to remind others that they too are more than flesh and blood. So here I am, years later, still trying to live with one foot in two worlds. A soldier shaped by war and a man reshaped by something far greater. I don't claim to understand it all. I don't claim to have answers for every question. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And I know that when death comes, it will not be the end. For me, for you, for any of us. It will only be the next mission. And that, my friend, gives me peace. Looking back now, I see my life divided into two chapters, before the light and after it. Before, I was a soldier fueled by duty, adrenaline, and the constant edge of survival. After, I became a man carrying a vision that reshaped everything I thought I knew about war, death, and life itself. That division wasn't clean. It was messy, filled with scars and doubts. But it gave me something I never expected to find: purpose beyond the battlefield. Some people ask me if I fear death after what happened. The truth? I don't. Not anymore. I respect it, yes. I know the pain it leaves for those who remain. But fear, that part died in Afghanistan. Because when you've looked beyond the veil, when you've felt the embrace of something eternal, death becomes less of an enemy and more of a doorway. I'm not reckless, I don't seek it, but I no longer tremble at its shadow. And that changes the way I live every single day. I've learned to slow down, to breathe, to notice the details most people rush past. The smell of fresh-cut grass, the rhythm of my daughter's laughter, the warmth of holding my wife's hand after a long day. These small moments are sacred, treasures I might have overlooked before. The battlefield taught me how fragile life is. The light taught me how beautiful it is. And together, those lessons remind me never to waste the time I've been given. Still, the hardest part is carrying the stories of those who didn't make it back. Their faces visit me in dreams, their names etched into my memory like dog tags I'll never take off. Sometimes I wonder if they're guiding me, pushing me forward when I stumble. Other times I feel their silence and it humbles me. I speak their names often, not just to remember them, but to honor them, because I believe with everything in me that they still hear us. I've had strangers tell me my story gives them peace. Mothers who lost sons, veterans battling despair, even people who never wore the uniform but live in fear of death. They've all said the same thing. Your story gave me hope. And every time I hear those words, I feel the weight of why I was sent back. Not to be a hero, not to be celebrated, but to be a bridge between this world and the one that waits beyond. The military taught me discipline, strength, resilience, but the light taught me compassion, surrender, and connection. It's strange, isn't it? Two worlds that seem so opposite, yet they shape me together. Now, when I speak to young recruits, I tell them the truth. You can be both a warrior and a man of peace. You can serve your country with honor and still carry tenderness in your heart. In fact, that balance, that duality, is where true strength lives. There are still nights when the darkness tries to pull me under. PTSD doesn't vanish just because you've had a vision of eternity. But when the nightmares come, when the silence grows heavy, I remember what Reyes told me. Not yet, brother. They need you. Those words are my anchor. They remind me that my mission isn't finished, that my pain has a purpose, that every scar is a part of the story I was meant to tell. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. You are more than your fear, more than your scars, more than the battles you've fought. Whether you've worn a uniform or not, whether you've faced death or simply faced hardship, there is a light waiting for you, a light that sees you, knows you and will never abandon you. And when your time comes, and it will come for all of us, you will not be alone. I promise you that. So, I continue my mission, not on the front lines of Afghanistan, but on the front lines of hope. Every conversation, every story, every moment I share is a piece of that light carried forward. I don't pretend to be perfect. I'm just a man, a soldier who died and came back. But I know this much. Life is not random. Pain is not wasted. And even in the darkest nights, the light is closer than you think. My name is Sergeant Daniel Brooks from Austin, Texas. I've walked through war, I've crossed into death, and I've come back with a message. That message is simple. There is more. More than fear. More than suffering. More than the end we all dread. There is peace, there is purpose, there is eternity. And until my last breath, I will keep telling this story. Because maybe, just maybe, someone out there needs to hear it. And if that someone is you, then my mission is complete.